Nice to see everybody now that we're getting started. Missed you. We weren't out of town. I was not feeling good one Sunday, and then the other, I was telling Charlie last Sunday we had an electrician supposed to finish work on Saturday, and he didn't do it until Sunday. So Kitty had to be there to tell him how to do it. So we listened both Sundays. We think we're up to date, except Kitty, when I asked her if she knew the lesson today, she said we're on Joshua 8. And it didn't help any for Buzz to support her and say, oh yeah, we're on 8. Well, no, guys, y'all studied 8 last time. We're on 9. That's exactly right. We're on 9. I am going to, by the way, I did have an eye procedure where they take a laser and blast your eyeball to where the stuff in your lens that is foggy goes away. So I have double vision. So I'm seeing this place is packed. You can't believe the number of people that are in here, and a lot of ugly people in this place. So pardon me for that. I also am going to be reading who we have here, so stay with me here. Prayer needs Floyd Murray, Arthur Mondragon, and then Sanders Ridgway, the grandson of Steve and Dana Wise, Kathy Smith, and Cindy Perry. Not a big long list. I know there's a lot more than's on there. Dick was telling me as far as Sanders, and Sanders is a month old or something, I guess, right now, that they at least are able to treat the seizures he was having. Now they're trying to find out what was causing them. It's nice to see Shirley not coming in a wheelchair or whatever. So good to see that. Ms. McFarland, by the way, she's walking on a walker, isn't she? And doing really well. Had the same basic problem that you did. And I did want to mention, I've told you about my sister periodically in San Antonio, whose daughter died. We all prayed for her. She had cancer, and she died a few years ago. And then at the same time, my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, had a stroke, and he's been in a wheelchair ever since that happened. So it's got to have been 4 or 5 years ago. And then now he's in rehab, I guess it is, and have to move him to a nursing home and put him on palliative care, I think it's called. And he doesn't want to do it. He's like most men, pretty hard-headed. So I have 2 sisters, and both of them think I know the answer to everything that's going on down in San Antonio. But pray for them. They need some guidance. Fortunately, my sister that's in San Antonio and her husband are both believers. The other sister is not. She's the one that Kitty and I keep working on a little bit. And so she needs prayers really more than anybody else does. So is there anybody else we need to add to the prayer list other than the ones I read and then my kin down in San Antonio?
Jared, can I say, he's well now though, but my little grandson, Rayburn, the one that was born in August, he had RSV
Okay.
this last week and was pretty sick. He could just hardly breathe, but
He's doing better now?
He's doing better now. He's still kind of raspy,
Yeah.
but he's doing better. So
Well, praise for that, yeah. Yeah, that RSV, I guess is that what you said it was? That's what Kitty's mother had it, and I thought I wasn't going to have a mother-in-law anymore, but she got better. So that's not bad about talking about that. But Kitty's been trying to get us to get that shot, and we eventually will, I guess. And I don't want to get up here and tell everybody they need their COVID shot, they need their flu shot, they need their RSV shot, and whatever else it's going to be, because I know there's some people here that don't believe in all of that. But take care of yourselves. Try not to infect anybody else. I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving. I will be with my in-laws, so I hope all of y'all have a great Thanksgiving. Shirley, you okay? Did I say anything wrong? Okay. Yes, sir.
Dagon's family has had COVID. Everybody in it had COVID. He got it real bad. He got so weak he fell and couldn't get up. And had to take him to the ER
Really?
a week ago. But he called me and said that he was much better. Everybody was improving.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Well, Kitty, we have a friend, Justine, that used to go to church here. In fact, she, as an electrician, she helped wire the building out there that we did. And she was coming in town this week, and everybody in her family that is here has RSV or COVID, which is RSV. So I don't know. All I know is just try not to cough on anybody if you can avoid it, and stay away from those that do. We've only got 27 verses to go through today, so I think it's about time for me to pray and get us started. Father, again, we appreciate living in a country that we have the ability to come worship you and to profess our faith in you without fear of retribution. And there's so many people in this world that don't have that freedom, and we pray they attain it quickly. We pray for all of these people on the prayer list. And I know that our prayer list that our church has a whole lot more people than this. We know you can heal anybody of anything with a mere thought. And we pray that you do that to all that are suffering, be it physical or mental. But we also know that your word clearly tells us that we're going to continue to face sickness and death and the other trials and tribulations that human beings face until you decide it's time for it to end. So until that time, give us the strength to maintain our relationship with you and make you the focus of our lives. And we pray for all of this in your Son's name. Amen. So since nobody here remembers that you went through Joshua 8 last week, I'm just teasing. I know the rest of you do, even though Buzz and my wife didn't. Just real quickly, we've gone, and I don't know how you are. The way I do with things like Joshua, I almost start feeling like I'm there. And crossing the Jordan, just having the faith in God to know that the waters were going to stop and I wasn't going to get drowned. Facing the walls of Jericho, realizing that there was no way that we were going to be able to knock those walls down without God, and that he did. And then being in a situation to where I have such trust and faith in God, why would people with me that I trust and respect end up going to Ai and try to beat those folks without God's help? And then we have Achan that actually stole some of the spoils from Jericho, and he ended up paying the ultimate price, but his family did also. And you look at stuff like that, and then you look at what happened last week, because last week was a great success. Joshua and the leaders recognized their problem in not seeking God's help when he sent the folks to Ai the first time, and now he says, okay, tell us what to do. God comes up with a great plan. It kind of reminds you, those of you that like Westerns, it kind of reminds you of the old thing about the Indians. They'd put a whole bunch of them behind the hill, then they'd send out 3 or 4 to wave to the cavalry and start, doing signs at them and stuff, make them mad where they chase them. And here comes the cavalry over the hill, and all of a sudden the rest of the Indians swoop on them. And that's kind of what happened. They got the folks out of Ai last week, killed 12,000, I believe it was. So it was a great success. So you would think everything is going great. Everything seems to be on schedule. And now we get into today's lesson. And today's lesson, in a way, is great, but in a way it's not. And it's something that's kind of hard to understand. So those of you that have read it know what I'm talking about. Those of you that maybe remember it or haven't read it, it'll be kind of interesting as we get into it. So here's the word. We're in Joshua 9, 27 verses. There'll be a lot of words here I can't pronounce. Don't laugh. We'll get through this. Number 1. This is the New American Standard Version of the Bible. Now when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, those in the hill country, in the western foothills, and along the entire coast of the Great Sea as far as Lebanon, and then mine has a parenthesis because it's going to describe the tribes. It talks about the kings of the Hittites, of the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Pezerites, the Hivites, and the Jezebites. If you think I can't pronounce, I was listening to a preacher, and when he got to Jezebites, he called it something like, I can't remember it. It's when you're fat and you've got stuff under your skin. What's that stuff called? Cellulite. He called them cellulite. And everybody started laughing at him, and I thought, I'm with you, man. I know what's going on. I understand it. 2, all these kings came together to make war against Joshua and Israel. However, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done in Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. The men, these are the people coming on this delegation, The men put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. The bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the men of Israel, "We have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us." The men of Israel told the Hivites, "But perhaps you live near us. How then can we make a treaty with you?" "We are your servants," they said to Joshua. But Joshua asked, "Who are you, and where do you come from?" And they answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God. For we have heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, who reigned in Asheroth. And our elders and all those living in our country said to us, 'Take provisions for your journey. Go and meet them and say to them, "We are your servants. Make a treaty with us." This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you, but now see how dry and moldy it is. And these wineskins that we filled were new, but see how cracked they are, and our clothes and sandals are worn out by the very long journey." The men of Israel sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live, and the elders of the assembly ratified it by oath. 3 days after they made the treaty with the Gibeonites, the Israelites heard that they were neighbors living near them. The Israelites set out, and on the 3rd day came to their cities. These are the cities of these folks that came over. And I can't pronounce all of them. Gibeon, Kephari, Beroth, Kirith, Jearim, or something like that. But the Israelites did not attack them because the leaders of the assembly had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. The whole assembly grumbled against the leaders, but all the leaders answered, "We have given them our oath by the Lord, the God of Israel, and we cannot touch them now. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live so that wrath will not fall on us for breaking the oath we swore to them." They continued, "Let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers for the entire community." The leaders' promise to them was kept. Then Joshua summoned the Gibeonites and said, "Why do you deceive us? Why did you deceive us by saying, 'We live a long way from you,' while actually you live near us? You are now under a curse. You will never cease to serve as woodcutters and water carriers for the house of my God." They answered Joshua, "Your servants were clearly told how the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you the whole land and to wipe out all its inhabitants from before you. So we feared for our lives because of you, and that is why we did this. We are now in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you." So Joshua saved them from the Israelites, and they did not kill them. That day he made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the community and for the altar of the Lord at the place the Lord would choose. And that is what they are to this day. So we have a situation here to where we have this group of people that come and convince Joshua and the leaders of the community that they are not the people that God said you have to kill them all. And you remember in Deuteronomy, it's very clear that there's 3 classes of people that are in the promised land or close to it that, I hope I'm not messing up the TV too much by moving around, that have to be treated differently. Number 1 is, if they don't live in the promised land, but yet they promise to be your servants, then what you do is you make them your servants. If they live in but if they're out of the promised land and they reject you and they fight against you, then you kill all the men. But you don't kill the women, and you don't kill all the donkeys and horses and dogs and stuff like that. You take them and you make them your slaves. And then there's the people within the promised land, and you kill them all. That's basically what Moses told the people when you get back in Deuteronomy. That's basically what he told them based on what God had told him to say. So the interesting thing as you listen and you read that is that these folks come up with really a very clever, I mean, it really took a lot of thought to come in here and do this. And what you should be asking yourself, I believe, because I ask myself, and you ought to be doing at least what I'm doing, is how in the world did they think of this? What happened so that they thought about doing what they did, which worked? Now, it worked with a price to pay, and the price to pay obviously was that their freedom was lost. But it's better to lose your freedom, at least as far as they were concerned, than it was to have you, your wives, your kids, and all of your household and donkeys and all of that killed, which is what would happen because they lived about 15 miles away, really and truly. They were clearly in the promised land. So let's get back into the word and let's kind of look at some of the things that I have kind of hit here. I won't read every word again, but basically we've got these kings and they all come together. And it's from they fight all the time apparently, but they're saying they've seen what happened or heard what happened at Jericho. They've heard what happened at Ai, and they said, man, there's no way we're going to win this battle unless we gang up on these folks. And we're all going to get together and we're going to do it. Now, you didn't hear anything in this lesson about what happened because that'll be next week. We'll get to know what happened to these 5 kings as well as all of their folks. But right now, that's the plan. They're going to do it. So that's one part of the lesson for today. But now what happens is part of the people that are affected by these 5 kings are these folks that came and said, we're going to deceive God's chosen people. We're going to convince them that we don't live in the promised land. And therefore, we're not subject to God's edict of killing. And that's exactly what they do. And they go to this great thing, man. They're just looking, they're covering every base they can. And did you notice that when they talk about what they had heard, there was no mention of Jericho. There was no mention of Ai. Because had they mentioned the success of the Israelites in those two cities, then that would prove they didn't live as far as they said they lived. Because they're saying we live very far away. So when you see them come in here, and this is the one thing, in 3 they're called the people of Gibeon. They're actually Hivites, Hivites, that's one of the groups. And you'll see them interchange as we get into this a little further. And they heard, and so in 3, they heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai. And so as a result, instead of saying, okay, we're going to join in with everybody else that's being controlled by these 5 kings, one of which is ours, instead of doing that, we think we got a better plan. And their plan is then goes through on into 4. They resorted to this ruse, and they send this delegation. And if you go through, you see the words that jump out at you: worn out, worn and patched, old clothes, dry and moldy. That gets us through verse 5. And so they've really gone to a lot of trouble to get this thing done. And so when they get to 6 and they get to Joshua, and they come up and they're dragging in, and they say, we have come from a distant country, make a treaty with us. And so if you stop right there and you're Joshua or you're any of the leaders of the Israelites, you sit there and you say, wait a minute, I can't take this at face value. So Joshua's to be commanded because, and the men of Israel are too, because they come in 7 and they say, but perhaps you live near us. How then can we make a treaty with you? So in verse 7, you've got the leaders of God's chosen people that are saying, no, I'm not going to take what you're telling me at face value. They're showing some common sense here. And they're saying, you might be trying to trick us. You might live near to us and therefore be our enemy, not somebody we would make a treaty with. Their response to the leaders is in verse 8, we are your servants. And it says they said it to Joshua, but of course the other guys were there too. Joshua then asked, who are you and where do you come from? He wants some details here. All they've said is we're wore out, we're tired, look at our donkeys, look at our equipment. This is horrible. We've come to make a treaty with you and we live far away. And Joshua's not buying it either. He's just like the other leaders. And he's saying, we need more evidence here. So who are you? Where do you come from? And they answer him in 9. And they're calling themselves now your servants, because they know that out of the 3 choices, the best choice they have is to become servants, to lose their freedom as opposed to being killed. So they answer, your servants, in other words, we, your servants, have come from a very distant country. Why? Joshua said, I want to know what's going on. Why? Here's where they answer him. Because the fame of the Lord your God. That's why we're here. We're here because we have heard about your God. And we have heard reports of him, all that he did in Egypt. Okay, that's part of it. And 10. And all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan. Now remember, they're west of the Jordan now. This was before they actually crossed into the promised land. So we've got these folks that live in the promised land because they don't want to be killed, are saying, we heard what your God did in Egypt. We heard what he did with these other 2 kings. And as a result of that, and only that, no mention of Jericho, no mention of Ai. 11, our elders and those living in our country said to us, and obviously they're just lying here, take provisions for your journey, go and meet them, the Israelites, and say to them, we are your servants, make a treaty with us, which is exactly what they did. So we've got these folks that have come in, and they have described what they believe the situation is, or at least what they want the Israelites to believe. The Israelites have questioned them. Now, what we're getting to, is that enough? Have they answered it well enough? And so they come back in at 12 with some more evidence. And they say, this bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day we left to come to you, but now see how dry and moldy it is? And then they go further. These wineskins that we filled were new, but see how cracked they are. And our clothes and sandals are worn out from the very long journey. So they're hitting it again. They're coming in here. This is kind of like an illegal matter. You know, one side presents their evidence, the other side presents their evidence, and then they counter each other. You go back and forth and try to show where the other side is not right. And so that's kind of the stage we're in right now. And so I actually, on this page, I'll skip it because I will read some of this. This was the Deuteronomy. If you wanted cites, it's Deuteronomy 20, 10 through 15. And that's where he's talking about the ones, this is the choices. Because it talks all the people who are outside of the chosen, if they agree to become your servants, become your servants. If they don't agree, then kill all the men. And leave the women, the children, and take all of the stuff they own, including animals, and you get to keep those. That's the way that went for people that were outside of the chosen property land that fought against them. But then, when you get to Deuteronomy 20:16 through 18, here's what Moses told them, coming straight out of God's mouth. Only in the cities of these people that the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, you shall not leave anything that breathes alive. Instead, you shall utterly destroy them. And then it names all these tribes, and one of them is the tribe these folks are from. And God told them back, or Moses told them through, or God told them through Moses back then, the reason is so that they will not teach you to do all the same detestable practices of theirs, which they have done for their gods, by which you would sin against the Lord your God. So that's the whole reason for this brutal, what we would perceive to be a brutal treatment of these people. And so then we come now, we've had the allegations made by the folks, the Hivites. We've got now the response from Joshua and the leaders. We have another response, a counter response from the Hivites, or Gibeonites, whatever we want to call them. And now we come into 14, and we come back again with another counter response from the Israelites. And it says, the men of Israel sampled their provisions. So they weren't buying it at face value. They're going to eat some of that moldy bread. They're going to drink some of that stale wine or whatever else they had. That's really not the key. The key is the end of verse 14. There's a but, and every time you see a but, it's typically a big but. And this but is really big, because the but is, but did not inquire of the Lord. So 14 is the key of everything we're studying today. You sit there and you say, you idiots, how could you be like this? He's brought you across the Jordan. He took you. He's done everything in the world to protect you and make you successful. And when you didn't consult with him, look what happened to you. You know, you had friends of yours that were killed in the first attack on Ai. You had Achan and his family stoned to death because of the fact that he didn't obey what God said about the spoils of war. And now here you are, you got these people selling you a story, and you don't even take a break to pray to God and ask him, hey, what do you think? And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't talk about y'all, at least not in public. And what I say in private is very good. Kitty will back me up on that. I find my life is in two parts. One part is when everything is going really well, and I tend then to forget about the importance that God has in my life. And I know y'all aren't that way. But that's when things are going well, even though I pray, my prayers are shorter. I don't seem to have the things that I believe I need God to help me do. And then after a while, things don't go as well anymore. And I'm sitting there and thinking, what happened? What happened? Well, I'm going to fix it. That's my first reaction. And my first reaction should be, I know why things aren't going so well anymore. I have lost the closeness that I had before with the God that has provided salvation for me. And so this is something you sit here and you say, or I say, because I'm critical of Joshua, I'm critical of the leaders. Had I been one of the other people there, I would have done more than grumble. The other people, the folks, the Israelites are going to be grumbling here. But they did not inquire. They didn't even say, God, what do you think? You know, and sometimes I get the attitude, well, you know, God's busy. He doesn't really need to listen to all this stuff. Well, I think every one of us here know that God is never too busy. He has the ability to hear every... Charlie, you want to say something?
I didn't want to interrupt.
That's okay.
I was going to say, if you fast forward a number of years, you get to the wisest guy in all the world. And so this guy is the smartest thing you've ever seen. And yet, when he quits walking close to the Lord, well, then he breaks every rule that he ever.
You know, and that's what's amazing, because you've got here Joshua, who has seen the Lord, the commander of the army, basically, the guy with the sword. It was, most people believe it was Jesus prior to his time, obviously, of coming to earth. And then you have a guy like Solomon. You have a guy that asked God, you know, or God said, what can, in fact, I think I may have it in here somewhere. God said basically, because Solomon was walking in the way of the Lord when he was king, he was, of course, David's son, and or not the first, but the second. And yet, here he's given what he wanted, which was wisdom. And in addition, God gave him wealth, all the wealth he could ever need. And what did he do? And Charlie's right. That what he did was that even though he had that wisdom, that wealth, I think, although I don't know, maybe it's not that clear, I think wealth can be, because I deal with it all the time, I think wealth can be some of the worst things that a person can have if you're talking about real wealth, because it does make you start thinking you don't need anybody else. You don't need to subserviate yourself to anybody when you have that, and you don't give any thought that that's fine. For what you're doing is hurting yourself and hurting those that love you, but what you're really doing is you're pulling further and further away from God. And we know in the end times that there's going to be a lot of people that have made professions of faith and that have gone to church and they've tithed, they've done all the stuff they're supposed to do, and they pull away. And I could tell you, I've been here I don't know how many years now, the number of people that we don't see here anymore in this church. And they just, it's like they've disappeared. And it used to be people that you felt close to and felt like we're all together in this. We're fighting the battle, the good fight. And so that's something. Solomon is a great point. Charlie, you got something else?
I was going to say, this
That's exactly right. Yeah, for those of, if there are anybody listening, that isn't, if there is anybody listening that isn't present, that's always one of the frustrating things when you're not here. You can't hear what the comments that are made in the audience, but Charlie's making a very good point. And I think that's something that jumps out at you when you study the Word. What you see is that people really haven't changed. Now, we're not as, I would like to think, as depraved as these folks were. Obviously, God felt we were worth saving. But it is something to where our nature is still a sinful nature. That's just the way it is. And every time we come down here, Kitty and I drive down here, something happens to make me irritated as a driver. And I have to always remind myself, that's one of God's children there. And, he may be a great Christian, but he doesn't know how to drive very well. And that's just part. In fact, I don't want to tell you. I wasn't going to tell you this, but it's something I have to get off my chest. Love the striping. Last time we were here, there was no striping in the parking lot, and so I pull into a slot. You got to move. You got to move. There's only one other person in the car. I'm not going to say who it was, and so the truck we have, if you put it in a certain gear, you can see. It's got that from like a satellite looking at your truck, and the truck is in the lines, except on the side this person isn't as big as the side on the line or the driver's side. And so I wasted probably a gallon of diesel trying to get this thing around. So just in case any of you park out there next to a gray truck, I almost took a tape measure to try to measure if I was in it or not. And again, I'm not criticizing anybody. I appreciate all the help I can get. Charlie, you're right. Thank you so much. Solomon is one of the greatest failures when you get into Ecclesiastes and you start listening to some of the things he says about, vanity, 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 and the things that we do. And what I find as I get older and dealing with the people I deal with, I see some of them that are very prideful type of people. They don't give God credit for what they've been able to accomplish in this life. And early in my life, I was certainly like that. I didn't accomplish a whole lot, but I sure felt like it's because of my hard work. And now I recognize that it's not. It's because God is guiding me in the Holy Spirit. Okay, so let's get, because I know I'm going to mess this up if we don't get going. Number 15, Joshua made a treaty of peace with them to let them live. The leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. So it wasn't just Joshua. So we've sampled the goods. We didn't inquire of God about whether or not we should do what these folks that are telling us they live far away want us to do, which is to make a treaty to let them live, not kill them all. We didn't do all of that, and we didn't inquire of God, and so now we go ahead and make the treaty. Joshua must have said, sounds good to me. Then the leaders ratify it. So it isn't just like Joshua himself made this decision. It's everybody that was in a position of leadership, which kind of gets you thinking about what goes on in Washington and Austin at times. And it just amazes you how we can't get people that come to agreements on things that seem so clear to us. Okay, now, so I'm always curious about things when we talked about, remember, this is the New American Standard, says ratified the treaty by oath. So I went to the 1995 version of the New American Standard, and it says swore an oath. It doesn't say here ratified it by oath, but it says swore an oath. The New International Version says ratified it by oath. The New English translation, I think it is, says sealed it with an oath. And then if you want to get back to the old one, you get King James, and it ended with swear, S-W-A-R-E, unto them. But the point is, every version there is, this wasn't just a handshake, yeah, we'll do this or we'll do that, or it wasn't even where you write it like you would now and, it's notarized and all this sort of stuff. This is swearing an oath. And so that's different than just saying, I'll do the best I can. And so we find out what happens here is that when you get to 16, 3 days after they made the treaty, they heard that these folks were neighbors living near them. These are people just like people that come over and say, I'm from somewhere else, but they're not really. And so they're neighbors. So guess what happens? The Israelites aren't happy. The folks aren't happy, and so they set out On the third day, they come to the cities of these people. It takes 3 days travel, and because they don't have cars or trains or buses or anything. It takes 3 days, and they've got 4 cities here. And I'm not even going to try to name them again because I messed them up so bad the first time. But they've got this, the people are so close. They're 3 days away, and they've got these cities. And it turns out these are really pretty good cities. In fact, the first one, the Gibeon city, is one that is just about like Jericho was as far as being secure. And so look at what happens in 18, because you think now, these guys have put it to us. They pull the wool over our eyes. We're going to go do what God told us to do. And we're going to kill everybody. It doesn't matter whether it's a newborn baby or what. We're doing what God told us to do to everybody within this area of the chosen land, the promised land. 18, but the Israelites did not attack them. Why not? Why didn't they do it? I'd have been in the front saying, let's do it. Because the leaders of the assembly, which includes Joshua, of course, they had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. There's no getting out of this. You swear an oath to God, to not just the God of Israel, but also our God. That's something you just don't back away from. If you made a mistake, you made a mistake. And so look what happens, though. The whole assembly grumbled against the leaders, which I would think we all would do, because we're sitting there, we're saying, well, now, wait a minute. First you tell us we got to kill everybody in the promised land, and now you're telling us because of your ignorance and your failure to inquire of God whether you should enter into a treaty with these people that committed a fraud on you, you're telling us now we can't do anything to them. We have to live with them. And so we got God on one side saying to kill them. We got these folks that took an oath that are saying, no, we can't kill them. I don't know. I think I probably would have said, I think it's time, guys, to go kill them. I think I'd rather listen to God. But I know that's wrong with what we're doing here. So here's what the leaders answer in 19. We did our oath was by the Lord, the God of Israel. This is we're saying by in God I trust, or in the name of God. The oath by the God of Israel. We cannot touch them now. And so this is what we're going to do. So here's the compromise. This is where the leaders are compromising with the citizens, with the Israelites in 20. This is what we're going to do. We're going to let them live, but we're going to do it so that the wrath of God will not fall upon us for breaking the oath we swore to them. And then in 19, what are we going to do to them? We're going to make them, if I can find 19, I've got so many cross references here. We're going to make them our servants. We're going to make them woodcutters, and we're going to, 21, I'm sorry. That was 20. We're going to make them woodcutters and water carriers for all of us. This is what we have the power to do that. We're stronger than they are. So this is our compromise. Well, apparently God was willing to accept that compromise because there was no flood or anything to get rid of all the Israelites. And so I don't know if any of y'all have cut much wood. I've carried water before, but not a whole lot. Cutting wood is no fun, even with a chainsaw. And so, they're going to have to cut wood, and they're going to do it for 5 minutes. Thank you, Buzz. They're going to do it basically for the rest of their lives, and their kids are going to do it for their lives, and they're going to do it for long as God is around. And so that's the compromise. So Joshua then in 22, he gets the Gibeonites up there and he says, hey, just before I pass judgment on you, tell me, why did you deceive us by saying we live a long way from you when actually you're near us? And he goes on in 23, you are now under a curse. You will never cease to serve as woodcutters and water carriers for the house of God. And here's the response of the Gibeonites. It isn't that, oh, that's not fair. We can't do that. They come in and say, your servants, we accept what you've just said. Your servants were clearly told how the Lord your God had, through Moses, had permitted you to get out of Egypt. The Red Sea was parted. All of the Egyptians that chased you were gone. You destroyed our armies of 2 of these kings that were on the east side of the Jordan in your travels. We heard of all of that sort of stuff. So in 25, we now are in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you. Well, here's the thing. In 24, the key there is your servants were clearly told. They were told about what happened in Egypt, what happened in the Red Sea, what happened with the kings of the Amorites. It wasn't something they just thought up. They were told. Well, who told them? As far as I can tell, the Word doesn't tell us who told them. But I'm guessing that the person who told them was the person who's still fighting with God, and that's Satan. Satan figured a way to get the word to these folks so that they could put this test on God's chosen people. And God's chosen people failed part of the test, but then they came up with a solution which may not have been as good as what God wanted, but it apparently was acceptable. And there's no mention that I can see anywhere else in the Bible that these Gibeonites ever got into a battle with the Israelites. Now, there's things that happen, and I think we'll get time to finish them here if I can get through these 27 verses. So they were told, we're now in your hands. Joshua saved them from the community. They did not kill them. He made them woodcutters and carriers. And then the key thing with 27, he made them woodcutters and water carriers for the community and for the altar of the Lord at the place the Lord would choose. And that's what they are to that day when this thing was written. So when you get to this, it's kind of interesting. If you go further, that finishes today's stuff. But if you get into 1 Chronicles 16, 39 through 40, the Gibeonites are become mentioned again. Because this is where they actually became servants of, the tabernacle was what they had before they had the temple, when they would move around. Every time they moved, they had to move it. Well, that's what these people became servants for that. And when you get to that, it talked about Zadok, the priest, and his relatives, the priests before the tabernacle of the Lord, and the high place, which was at Gibeon. It was at one of these cities, is where they actually set up an altar to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, and also peace offerings, I think they did. But also, David's mighty men, one of those was a Gibeonite. I can't pronounce Ishmael something. This is in 1 Chronicles 12:4. Ishmael, I'm going to say the Gibeonite, was a mighty man among the 30, in charge of the 30, not just some flunky, but up in a level. And then you get Solomon, who Charlie raised. And you have in 1 Kings 3 through 5. Now Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, except that he was sacrificing and burning incense on the high places. And the king, talking about Solomon, went to Gibeon, the city again, to sacrifice there. And so you've got this thing that the relationship they had was master and servant, but the masters were utilizing the servants not just for hauling wood and cutting wood and hauling water. If you get into Nehemiah 3:7, talking about rebuilding the wall, there were 95 Gibeonites. That's actually in Nehemiah 7:25. It lists the number. Sons of Gibeon, 95. There was 95 Gibeonites that were helping build the walls. And so you sit there and you say, you know what? It seems like that there was some good that came out of this fraud. As a human being, and particularly as a lawyer, I'm sitting there and I'm saying, you don't have to honor your oath. These people committed a fraud on you. And that's the way it would be in a court of law. But that's not the way it is with God. If you're going to make an oath, you shouldn't make an oath in God's name, but if you're going to make an oath in God's name, you better be ready to back it up. Buzz, how are we doing? 1 minute. Okay, so I had a bunch of others. I always do this. I was trying to see if I could have one thing that, I had the armor of God. I was going to talk about that. I like this. Proverbs. I usually don't like Proverbs. 25:19. Like a bad tooth and an unsteady foot is confidence in a faithless man in time of trouble. When we put our confidence in somebody, we better be darn sure that he or she can justify the confidence we put in them. And honestly, if they're human beings, they don't exist. Amen. Really and truly. It is strictly God. And that's what we have to do, and that's what I have to do worse than the rest of y'all, I am sure. So y'all pray for me. Help me focus. Help me every morning make it a priority to be sure that I pray and that I treat my wife better than I do now, because I'm sure she would tell you that life with me, I wish I had a camera. I wish you could see her face. Yeah, no, she's like that at home. That's what you need. Okay, here we go. Let me close this thing out, guys. I appreciate y'all. Father, again, we thank you so much for your word. If we take the time to really read it and study it, and with all the things you've given us, correlated things you've given us that we can go to, we normally can understand your intent. And when we see that, we recognize quickly that you are the one true God, and that we are sinners, but we are sinners saved by the grace and mercy that you have bestowed upon us in the form of the sacrifice your Son made for us and the Holy Spirit that you instilled within our hearts. And help us not grieve the Holy Spirit. Help us concentrate each and every day on you. Help us understand that the trials and tribulations that we face in this world are to make us stronger. And one of these days, we will stand before you and we'll be answerable, not in the form of losing our salvation, but answerable for the way we conducted ourselves after we made the affirmation of faith in the gospel of your Son. So help each of us live a godly life. Help each of us honor you each and every day. And I pray for Kenny as he preaches the next session. Open our minds and hearts to your word. And if there be anyone there that has yet to make an affirmation of faith, may today be the day that they do so. And I pray for all of this in your Son's precious name. Amen.